Welcome to Movie Talk, our weekly show about movies, the people who create them, and the people who star in them. Starting with Thief in 1981, Michael Mann has created an extraordinary body of work as a writer, producer, director, and occasional renegade. Michael, thank you for coming here.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
So we were all summoned into this business by a different force.
Right.
With you, I read somewhere that it was Kubrick.
As an undergraduate, I was an English lit major and kind of plagued with what I was going to do with my life. 'Cause I know I didn't really want to be an English lit professor, but I was heading towards that track. And Dr. Strangelove came out in 1963.
Right.
And it was a revelation of sorts. It was because it, aside from being a great film and stunning, it revealed to me that you could make film and have a completely independent piece of content that you generated yourself, and still be part of mass media, mass communication, and impact lots of people.
First films that you were involved with, though, I mean, even I remember vividly Thief.
I'm a thief. I've been in prison, all right?
So what? I don't care.
So what?
Don't tell me.
So what? I never even told my wife that.
I don't
Who is now
care.
gone. Did I ever come on to you?
No.
Well, you see.
See what?
See, I am a straight arrow. I am a true blue kind of a guy. I've been cool. I am now unmarried. So let's cut the mini moves and the bullshit and get on with this big romance.
That was a tough subject, and I identify a lot of the subject matter that you tend to undertake about tough guys.
Yeah, it was a tough subject, but I grew up inner city in Chicago, and I probably was imagining some of the visuals in The Thief I probably encountered when I was, in my late teens, early 20s. I was, there's always something special about driving through some of those cage iron bridges on the way to Kankakee across the river. There were some parts of the industrial landscape in Chicago around the river were really always exciting to me. I didn't really know why. So I had kind of a sense of the place.
I go to work for you, I'm pulling a lot of exposure.
Our protection trades that off.
Yeah, take a bust.
Turn around, there's going to be a lawyer, bondsman right there. You never spend a night in jail.
Look, I steal ice. No furs, no coin collections, no stock certificates, no cottage, no treasury bonds, no nothing. Just diamonds or cash.
Fine.
There was a process that I guess I still follow, which is that if I'm going to make a film about thieves, I don't look at other films about thieves. I go and meet and hang out with thieves. The authenticity kind of flowed from a man named John Santucci, who's the thief that Thief was based on, and meeting Dennis Farina at that time, who was a detective, and Chuck Adamson, and some of these characters in Chicago who were both detectives and thieves, all of whom came from the same neighborhood. They all knew each other growing up. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of informed Thief more than anything else.
Will you let me go now? Please? You will tell the truth. I promise. Good.
To me, when I think of Manhunter, say, I think of
Right.
the visuals in it. And I think of you as being attracted to a subject by dint of what you see in terms of visuals. But I can see, on the other hand, there's a journalistic quality to your thinking, too. Sometimes you're just drawn by the story.
I'm usually drawn by the story or the character, and I think what makes anything tremendously appealing to us, to the kind of motivation that makes us, decide to dedicate the next 2 years to making a thing happen, is sometimes not really very logical. I couldn't figure out what to do in about 1990, and I suddenly realized that I'd had just two images in my head since I was about 3. The one was of a kind of a tragic suicidal death of a beautiful young girl, and the other was of people running, Iroquois running, for some reason, it occurred to me in '89 or '90, and parts of it have stuck in my mind this whole time. Nothing logical, and I'd love to make Last of the Mohicans. So talked to Roger Birnbaum and Joe Roth, and they say, great idea, let's go develop it.
What's so difficult, though, is with a young actor in particular to figure out who they really are. The business of discovery, who lies beneath, is complicated for a director.
It's complicated for a director, but what's interesting, I saw My Left Foot, and we were going to cast Last of the Mohicans, and I saw a picture of Daniel Day-Lewis. And everybody thought that Daniel Day-Lewis was like small, skinny kind of character, and he was not. I mean, you know, and I knew and I'd heard that he was a long-distance runner, and that he was tall and everything. And then and I saw a little more about him, and I came to the conclusion that Daniel Day-Lewis had to be Hawkeye. And I was fortunate in that Roger Birnbaum and Joe Roth said, "Oh yeah, absolutely." You know, you thought that there'd be some kind of argument from the studio, you know, but no, they got it right away. Yeah. Great, you know, you can build them up. I'll build them up. Don't worry about it.
Get down.
The decision of what film to make, subject matter, who's going to star in it? I mean, what are the components that go into your decisions of tackling a project?
I don't know. I mean, it's always some of it is a mystery, you know. Chuck Adamson, who passed away about 3 years ago, was a great guy, who's Dennis Farina's partner in real life, very, very tough Chicago cop, high-end detective. He told me about sitting in a restaurant with a man named Neil McCauley, and somebody who had a great respect for as a professional thief, but he, as Chuck said, I'd blow him out of his socks without thinking twice about it. And they both acknowledged that that if one had the opportunity or the necessity, they would, without blinking, kill the other. And the real conversation happened at the Belden Deli on Lincoln Avenue in Chicago, and that the apparent contradiction that wasn't really a contradiction of these two characters thrown together, fated to have some sort of a lethal outcome at the end, just stuck with me, and it eventually became Heat.
You know, I have this recurring dream. I'm sitting at this big banquet table, and all the victims of all the murders I ever worked are sitting at this table, and they're staring at me with these black eyeballs because they got 8-ball hemorrhages from the head wounds. And there they are, these big balloon people, because I found them 2 weeks after they'd been under the bed. The neighbors reported the smell. And there they are, all of them just sitting there.
What do they say?
Nothing.
So sometimes it's an image from the past, really.
It's an image from the past, or a situation, or the symmetry that sometimes occurs of, you know, this strange collision of these two men who are on opposite sides of the law, but parts of them are very similar to each other. They both acknowledge that they respect the other. They both acknowledge they would kill each other. Mm-hmm. It defeats the typical, you know, protagonist antagonist. They're both protagonists. When we're with one, we're invested in him. When we're with the other, when we're with the Nero kid, we're invested in him, right. Which is a very challenging kind of a collision to chart.
Mm-hmm. On the floor, now!
Play a game, Mr. President. It's called Spin the Dial.
And to a degree, that was probably true of Public Enemies.
That was one of the difficulties I had with Public Enemies, because I didn't want to repeat that same dialectic. Dillinger and Purvis didn't share that symmetry.
They look at you right before they go. And then they just drift away into nothing. I'll keep you up nights.
What keeps you up nights, Mr. Dillinger?
Coffee.
Johnny is a natural actor. Johnny is somebody who, it lives within him in some kind of an intuitive way, and when he produces that, he's quite terrific.
Johnny, how long does it take you to go through a bank?
Oh, about 1 minute, 40 seconds. Flat.
He related to Dillinger, and my ambition was to get some evoke some really strong emotional moments from Johnny, some real intimate, stuff. And he located himself in some very painful places to make that happen.
Yeah, I want to talk to you.
Good, I want to talk to you. This is
I
my
did
house.
not
In front of my
burn
wife,
you.
my kids.
I did not give you up to anyone.
What
I'm here
business do we have?
to straighten something out with you. Right here, right now.
You even mention my name. You haven't talked to anybody about
What
me?
am I gonna mention
Wyatt
your
Brown
name?
Williamson. No, I spoke
How the
to
hell do I know about Brown?
It happened
Williamson?
just after I talked to
I
you.
don't know.
I
What
do
are you
not
mad?
like coincidence.
Well, I don't like paranoid accusations. I'm a journalist. Think. Use your head. How do I operate as a journalist? By screwing the people who could provide me with information before they provided me with it.
The Insider was a great movie and a gutsy one, because I remember when it came out, it was surrounded with a certain controversy. I mean, that was a remarkable picture.
It was it was a great adventure to make that film. It was very challenging because it's 2 hours and 45 minutes of people talking.
If you want to honor this agreement, then that's simple. You do so. You say nothing, you do nothing. There's only one guy who can figure that out for you, and that's you, all by yourself.
So it's a question of tone, as really.
Tone, sound, the sound mix was critical. Andy Nelson was the sound mixer on it, and a beautiful, beautiful job. The music was, everything was critical. I wanted it to be as tense and suspenseful and potentially lethal as the real events were for the real people.
The champ is here! Ladies and gentlemen, the heavyweight champion of the world has arrived! The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here!
Would you say Ali was your most demanding film then?
It was in Africa because of the conditions and the responsibility that we took for everybody who was working with us, whether they were extras or not. We had 25,000 extras in a stadium that had not had plumbing or electricity since 1974. Everybody was fed, everybody had, the rain was potable water. We had 24-hour round-the-clock medevac for extras for everybody.
What's been your experience having been involved in so many different kinds of movies? Is the ideal atmosphere one of tension and conflict or one of peace and love?
There's nothing about tension and conflict that's good. But sometimes you're making films that have a very high level of ambition. Certainly shooting Ali was that, particularly the degree of difficulty for Will Smith and actually boxing and learning how to box, boxing for 9 months before we started.
Sonny Liston, you ain't no champ! You a chump! Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee! Ah! Rumble, young man, rumble!
I think Will Smith is doing fantastic work. His dedication to the work we did together on Ali was total. I mean, it started with him knowing that if he can ever play Ali, it had to be right then. And it was playing that role meant so much to himself as a man. So when the people around you are of the same level of commitment, then it's great. And I've had many people I work with right now, I've been working with, 15, 16 years. They're veterans of all these things. And that's, then you're all on the, you're all going for the same thing, and people become very invested in the content. When people are invested in the content, whether it's a focus puller, or a grip, it's terrific. And that's, and you're all there together.
The tough thing about being a filmmaker is that it is a chain of decisions. Now, do you find, looking back on your career, what types of decisions have been the toughest? Do they involve casting, script, or editing?
Probably the editing, because editing to me is you're rewriting the movie yet again. I mean, you kind of rewrite it, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% when you're shooting, and then you're rewriting it again in the editing, and then when you have the final mix, it's the first time since you first heard this idea, when it was only 3 paragraphs long, that the film is an organic, unified whole, and you could really see the whole film.
Well, which of the pictures would you say changed the most as a result of post-production? Now,
Hard to say, because
Heat was a tough one to edit, wasn't it?
Yeah, because Heat was massive. It was also an accelerated post. And you know, Warner's asked me if I could finish the film for an early release, and I said, wait till I'm about 5 or 6 weeks into the editing, and when I see how the story's falling together, then I'll tell you whether or not we could make an accelerated edit.
Right.
And I said, yeah, we can. And so then began, here's blank check. You just do whatever you got to do. Just get this thing done by this date.
But this was so tough because you really have to be your own toughest critic. So I really so much respect that quality of being able to judge yourself.
Well, when I've made a mistake, it's not going back to the screenplay, not going back to my original interpretation, my plan for the picture before I started shooting it, and hitting that refresh button from that point of view. And when I've made a mistake, it's because I've just dealt with the cut film and edit and re-edit and re-edit the cut film. You really have to dig down deep in yourself and compel yourself to push forward into achieving the right perspective on the material. That's I don't know if anybody else goes through that, but I certainly go through it.
So, in creating Luck, what made you decide that that's a story that you wanted to connect with?
David Milch's screenplay. He gave it to me. I didn't particularly want to jump into television, but this is something I couldn't put down. It happened to be exactly what I wanted to do at that time.
Let me see your horse owner's license.
I'm surprised the camera guy didn't ask me who I thought I was kidding.
Hey. No ifs, ands, or buts. You're that horse's owner.
It just parachuted you into these characters in their rather esoteric world of race, of gambling and owning horses and racetracks, and David had constructed hints to the backstory. For example, Nick Nolte's character. You don't really know where he came from or why, but there's a wariness about him. So in using the fractal of just pure attitude, of directing a very disciplined attitude, it signals something about history, something about the past, just because he has an attitude of wariness. And you don't know yet about a scandal involving that horse's father who was murdered, and he should have done something about it, and how that's going to have repercussions that will eventually, collapse into the present.
But it's exciting because now and then in some of your pictures, I had a sense that you would like it to have gone on even further. Some of your movies do tell a long story. And what's exciting about doing this with HBO is you can tell a long, complicated story.
Some stories are long stories. Some stories need 9 hours to be told, and that's and Luck really is a 9-hour movie.
7:45. I'm falling asleep here.
You had a full day.
As far as them that did what they did to me.
Are they moving the way you want?
Yes, they're gonna move on that racetrack.
Luck is the most harmonious crew and cast I've ever put together, working with Dustin and Nick Nolte, who is brutal to himself on when he does something. And he would do a take in the pilot for Luck, and I start walking towards him, and he says, "No, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. Wait a minute, we're gonna do it again. That was terrible." And he writes everything out that he's going to do. Every single line of dialogue, he writes it out again in his own handwriting. So,
Nick does.
Yeah, Nick does. And all actors are totally different. Dustin was the first person I thought of for playing Ace. He's one of the reasons I did it. And I went to him first, and he said yes. And one of the reasons was because Dustin had never played a part like this, ever. And that's great, I think, to put an actor on a frontier.
Yeah.
Where it's a little bit dicey, you know, it's a little insecure, and it's an adventure. And a courageous actor like Dustin is, you know, he responds to that.
When we trust or when we don't?
I don't trust anyone, not even myself. You, I give a pass.
Several of the performances under your command have earned Oscars. Looking back on them, did they come easy?
No, they don't come easy, and it's I have the highest regard and I am humbled before actors, and I think I know enough about it to understand how truly difficult and the degree of difficulty is that projection into acting, and I approach it, directing actors, from the point of view of it's my obligation to speak to that actor in that actor's language, not to impose my language.
Yeah.
And that's critical. So every actor's dialogue with himself, and whether it's the school he comes from or if he's an unschooled actor, how he truly is, if he's kind of a natural actor, and so to bring myself to their understanding of what they're doing and my directing of them, and the I've been blessed with some really terrific actors and who have just brought everything to it. I think of De Niro and Al in Heat, Pacino and Russell Crowe and Insider, and Ashley Judd in Heat. I mean, it's just great work. And when you get actors working at that level, it's really a wonderful place to be. I can't imagine a better place in the world to be. So I've been around very, very committed people who would do just about anything to achieve a certain level of excellency in acting.
It's great to talk to you. Much enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming in. Welcome to Movie Talk, our weekly show about movies, the people who create them, and the people who star in them. Stephen Daldry's career has spanned the stage. He is the man who created the musical Billy Elliot, as well as the film, to such memorable films as The Hours, The Reader, and Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. The last time I saw you was a moment of tension where I think you had seen the first print of Extremely Loud, and you looked a little uneasy about it.
I was a little uneasy. I hadn't even seen the print myself, and it was the first audience we'd shown it to where you were there, and I wasn't sure how it would look or how it would go down, in fact.
Well, it looked splendid and went down great. I mean, I have rarely heard such applause, so it was a very felicitous screening.
I was very happy that it went so well, yeah.
Listen to me, I'm gonna be home in about 20 minutes.
No, you listen to me. We broke a window to let in some air. Now I'm gonna be okay.
In the building and there was smoke everywhere. They're trying to save us. Where are you?
I'm on the 106th floor.
An American Airlines plane was hijacked.
Thomas, you listen to me and you come home.
I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna try to call you again in a few minutes.
Please just stay talking to me.
You don't like simple projects, whether it's a movie or a play. What is it about your taste in subjects that leads you to dangerous zones?
I never think I'm going into dangerous zones, to be honest. And a point of example is Extremely Loud. And I knew making a film about the 9/11, or at least the consequences of 9/11, was people are going to have strong views on, but the film, as it proves, has become controversial, which is I'm interested in. I'm interested in the conversation. I'm interested in why people get distressed by it, why people get angry about it, and why people want to have a conversation about it.
So my experience has been the audiences themselves accept the picture for what it is, but the critics are dwelling a lot about how provocative it is to deal with 9/11. Do you find that?
Certainly, a lot of the critics have found a whole lot of issues about how to tell stories about 9/11, yeah. But again, I mean, I've shown the film now, since we last showed it with you, sort of all over North America, and audiences have a very different sort of response to it.
3 o'clock, okay? We'll go everything.
Who's that?
My husband. You must think this is very odd.
Oh, I think a lot of things are odd. People tell me I'm very odd all the time. I got tested once to see if I had Asperger's disease.
This kid is absolutely brilliant and extremely loud. But that's, again, that's tough to direct kids. You're a man of great patience.
Yeah, that is certainly true. But in this particular case, it wasn't about patience. Thomas Horn, I think, gives one of the greatest screen performances by a young actor in the history of cinema. I think it's genuinely astonishing. I think we were blessed to have him and find him. But I think that he accesses his emotions in a way that is truly phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Well, I read somewhere in an interview with him that he explained that he would listen to your input and then he'd go and think for half an hour and figure, well, what would my character do? I thought it's an interesting discipline for someone who wasn't an actor.
He was incredibly disciplined, and you know, the key things you have to do with it, with any actor, particularly it's true of the young actor, is create a methodology where you can have a conversation and understand exactly what both of you are up to and be truthful with each other. Mm-hmm. And we went through a methodology with Thomas that he grasped with great enthusiasm, and then he embarked on this journey with incredible courage, I thought. And the rest of the adult cast, of course, a fantastic adult cast, were very supportive of that particular process.
Ms. Bullock and Mr. Hanks, that's a pretty good cast.
Joined by the amazing Max von Sydow and
yeah,
the great Viola Davis, who's having an incredible year.
I'm trying to find a lock for this key that was in the envelope that once belonged to my father.
I'm sorry, I don't know anything about the key or your father.
Can I take your picture so I can remember you?
Working with children, it seems to me to go through a lot of takes would be a difficult discipline. I mean, they'd lose it seems to me.
No, yes and no. Again, in Thomas's context, he understood the idea of repeated action. So we really taught him what it is to find the moment, repeat the moment, and actually refine that moment. Mm-hmm. And Thomas was incredibly disciplined about this.
How come you don't speak? Are your vocal cords damaged or something? Or did something scare you to death? Cool. When was the last time you spoke? Do you ever try to talk? Why don't you try to say something to me? Go on. My name is the Renter.
Now, at any point, did you feel that Max von Sydow should talk?
Do you know, what a good question. And it was a debate. It's so funny you should say that. It was a debate about whether at the end of the film he might say something. But in the end, Max was very clear that he thought he shouldn't. Mm-hmm. And had a very long conversation with Eric Roth, and we decided in the end Max was right and he should not speak.
Plenty of boys do ballet, you know.
Do they, Nick? What boys do ballet?
Nobody round here, but plenty of men do.
Puffs?
Not necessarily puffs.
Who like?
What about that Wayne Sleep? He's not a puff.
Huh?
He's as fit as an athlete.
Ah, bet he couldn't beat Daley Thompson.
Maybe he's not in a race, but in stamina. Why don't you come tomorrow? You can just watch.
I can't. Gotta go to boxing, haven't I?
Now, directing children, you did it again in Billy Elliot. Were there many takes? You always wonder with someone of that age and inexperience, is it like take 12 or 15 that we're seeing, or is that him?
We rehearse. But I come from the theatre, don't forget, so...
Indeed.
You're not making it up on the day. There's no trickery here. There's no, trying to fool the child, nor is there, trying to capture little moments that may or may not be strung together in the edit room.
Yeah. I used to go to ballet. See?
Aye, for your nana. For girls, not for lads, Billy. Lads do football or boxing or wrestling. Not friggin' ballet.
But I seem to always run into your moments of tension. There was the opening of Billy Elliot, and I remember you introduced me to the cast and the backup cast.
That's exactly
and the
right.
backup to the backup cast. And that was an extraordinary evening. Well, I remember you said to me, okay, we made it in London, despite these arcane references to political figures no one can remember. But Broadway will never accept it. But in point of fact, you didn't change it much for Broadway.
We did not even the language. And funnily enough, you know, there's all this press at the moment because Meryl Streep's just come out with The Iron Lady and this movie about Maggie Thatcher. So suddenly people are beginning to understand who this British Prime Minister was again.
Once again, I don't think you felt that this was a sure thing, that Billy Elliot was a home run.
No, neither the film, we never expected the film to do particularly well. And when it did, it was a complete surprise. No, exactly the same was true of the stage show.
Yeah.
Both in London, and then the idea that it would run on Broadway, that it would become a Broadway hit, we just had no idea of.
It's just up here. I'll be fine now. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Look after yourself.
The Reader was, I thought, a fascinating movie that was a bit underrated to me. I thought that the public didn't quite get it. I don't know if you were disappointed in the reception to The Reader.
No, quite the reverse, funnily enough, Peter. I always thought that the film would be more successful in Europe, and it was profoundly successful within Europe. And,
yes, in Europe it was.
So
I just felt in the U.S. it didn't quite.
Oh, I see.
It wasn't as understood as it could have been.
Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. But the joy for me was I was making a movie about Germany, and it was a country that I'd been spending a lot of time in since I was a schoolboy. So for me, it was a total pleasure to be in Germany for 2 years making the movie and then taking the movie back to Germany once I finished it.
And the German public did accept it, though. Right?
Yeah, no, we were was very happy with how it went down in Germany.
What's your name?
What?
Your name.
Why do you want to know?
I've been here 3 times. I want to know your name. What's wrong with that?
Nothing, kid. There's nothing wrong with that. It's Hannah.
You looked so suspicious.
What's yours, kid?
Michael.
Michael? So I'm with a Michael.
I remember one of the times I ran into you, you were having a great argument with Harvey Weinstein.
There is nothing more pleasurable than having arguments with Harvey Weinstein.
I do it all the time.
And I mean that in the best way.
Yeah, but one does have to yell at him. But there was a great deal of let's say, spirits. I mean, so it was late in the evening, and he had had a few, and you had had a few, and you guys were going at it. I loved it.
Were we really?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love Harvey. And I'm sure we do go at it, and I never remember.
The search for the 6th borough was the greatest expedition ever.
All right, I've got amateur entomologist, francophile, amateur archaeologist, computer consultant.
Why amateur everything?
It's a compliment.
Amateur pacifist?
We are at a festival. Do you find that it's important for a filmmaker to proselytize? Once you've finished a movie, you're not really finished yet. You have appearances to make.
Do you know, I feel a responsibility, particularly in this case, although I felt it last time on The Reader to Harvey, to support the people that gave you the money.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, it's Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers have been exceptional, I would say, exceptionally supportive of a filmmaker. And so I'm happy to do anything they ask me to try to get the film out to an audience and to get the film seen by as many people as possible.
But once again, it is not the easiest subject to construct in terms of marketing. Extremely loud. I mean, to explain it to the public that this really is a riveting drama, it isn't just about 9/11, that takes a certain skill.
I don't know why you go to the movies, Peter. I don't know why people go to the movies. I don't know why really people go to the theatre. The only thing I know why people really go to entertainment, I mean, they go for a number of reasons. They go to laugh, and they go to have a profound emotional experience. I'm hoping that this film can give people an emotional experience that is cathartic and profoundly moving. And I think that if you can do that, I think that the film is about loss. It's about catastrophic loss. But loss is the one thing we all share. Everybody in their life has loss. This is not a movie that's out of anybody's experience. Of course, it's out of the experience of not everybody had catastrophic loss like the characters in this film in 9/11. But everybody's had loss. It's part of the human condition. And so the idea of sharing loss and sharing loss with a family that went through that extraordinary experience on 9/11, then I think that can only be a collective experience that is a powerful thing for us all to share.
Excuse me. Can you tell Billy Elliot that his family is here?
So I must ask you a last question. When I did see Billy Elliot 3 times in different places. Now, did you ever go to it as its director and see the cast absolutely mess up and say to yourself, how did this happen?
Do you know, I never did.
Really?
I never did. And it's a good question, but I literally 3 nights ago, I went to the show right now is at the Kennedy Center in Washington. And I went to the Kennedy Center without telling the cast I was going. And I was on my way here, and I thought I'd just nip in and have a little sit at the back and not tell them I was in, and just to see how it is. And I hadn't seen it for a while on that particular tour. And it was fantastic. And the audience was having a ball, and I thought, how great that I can actually turn up out of nowhere without anyone knowing, watch my show, and come out of it saying, wow, that was a great evening.
That is really gratifying. Did you go afterwards backstage?
Of course, and told them, and they were outraged and delighted, but outraged that I hadn't told them.
You snuck up on them.
I snuck up on them.
Yeah. But I remember, again, that opening week in London when you had the kids lined up in the alley behind the theater.
Exactly.
And they were wonderful kids, and all of them looked like they were dying to get on.
I am so happy you remember that, Peter. That's a real joy you do. It was one of the great nights of my life, and I was very happy you're there to share it with me.
Well, I appreciate you sharing it with us. My wife and I were absolutely thrilled because these were such vivid, the cast, the backup cast. They were terrific kids. And they all got their moment.
They all got their moment.
Yeah.
And how great, Peter. I've had so many great moments with you in my professional life, and it's great to be here and talking to you again.
Well, it's a delight to talk to you. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Peter.
The job of the film critic sounds like total unabated fun. But in point of fact, film criticism is very demanding of patience, skill, and forbearance. Todd McCarthy is a master at all of the above. Todd, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Peter.
Now, here's the thing about the critic's job. People say critics don't count anymore. Do you agree with that thesis?
Well, there's certainly 2 ways to look at it. To grant that, the semi-truth of that now, it used to be that there were a few critics, and they were all important, famous few critics in New York, and then every small town even had a critic. So you knew who the critics were, and they had a voice. And they became kind of mini celebrities in their own right for many, many years. And now, living up to the newspaper editor's view that anybody can be a film critic, even a sports writer, just bring them over and anyone has a right to their opinion, everyone is because of the internet. So anyone who has an opinion about movies with the democratic means of news dissemination now, anybody is a critic. So you could legitimately say that professional film critics' stature and standing has been diminished somewhat. However, Roger Ebert, who's been around as long as any critic now, feels that film criticism is in a great period now because there are so many voices and because there's so much instantaneous exchange. It's not just that you lay down your opinion and it can't be argued with and discussed. In fact, more people are, in a way, discussing films and discussing views and criticism about films than ever before. So it's a very different thing. I would say the egos of individual professional critics might have been dented a little bit over the last few years. Number 1, because they're being laid off at record numbers. Number 2, because their stature is diminished. It's a more spread out field. But it doesn't mean that the value of critical opinion is anything diminished from what it used to be.
True, but in the 70s, Pauline Kael, who was a renowned critic for The New Yorker and other publications, she would sweep into the room with her entourage. And boy, she would scare the hell out of people.
That's right.
When Pauline was there, you knew you were going to live or die. And I always admired the way some filmmakers like Robert Altman knew how to play some of the famous critics very shrewdly.
But there were only a few of them, so you knew who you could deal with. If you had relationships or somehow interacted with 5 or 6 critics, you sort of had the important ones covered. But nowadays, as I say, there's so many, and there's nothing that gives any particular extra weight to one over another. So if you just go online and troll around for 30 minutes or so, you could read 20 or 30 different people and see what the range of experience is. And there's this whole notion now of kind of amalgamated critical sites where you can just look on there on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and so on and see 50 opinions, and you can decide for yourself.
And I find that annoying because I don't want to know what the cacophony of voices has to say. I'd like to know what 2 or 3 or 4 people, you being one of them, who I respect, what you guys think about it.
Well, I do like to think that there's still a value in, number one, being a professional, in the sense that no one's going to hire, no paper, no venue of any kind is going to hire someone to review classical music, art, serious literature, music, opera or symphony music, if they're not somehow well versed in those fields. But that's never entirely applied to film criticism. Somehow that's always been the exception. You accept scholarly opinions about those arts, but not about movies. And I like to think there's a value in the people who really do know the history of movies and who've seen most of the important films to be able to talk about them in a certain way.
I would agree, except for this, that really they're 2 totally different streams of film. There is the art films or the specialty films, and the tentpole films, the studio films that cost $200 million and are based on comic strips or whatever. And it seems to me it's an entirely different discipline. Like when you go in to a tentpole picture, knowing its origins and knowing what its aims are, do you exercise a whole different group of criteria?
Well, yes, you accept the film for its purpose in life, and its purpose in life is to be a massive crowd pleaser. However, you now have more and more sort of interesting filmmakers sometimes setting their feet into that territory. I mean, anytime Christopher Nolan makes a film, you have to take it rather seriously or look at it from an artistic point of view. Some people kind of get into that from time to time, and even more routine directors do a better job than others. But but again, even in the 70s, if those films had existed then, people wouldn't be rushing to see what Pauline Kael said about Spider-Man 3 or, Sherlock Holmes 2. I mean, that's not the function of critics like that, to discuss films like that, really, because, and then let's face it, fanboys have taken over a whole little section of film criticism, and maybe for those kind of films, those people are more important than the New Yorker and the New York Times.
But do you ever say to yourself, when you're seeing a picture of that sort, do you ever say, what the hell am I doing here? I mean, this picture is aimed at 12-year-olds at best. Why am I taking my time to see it?
Well, but there were always films like that.
That's true.
So, all the smoky films back in the 70s, and those weren't even terrible compared to some films. But there are some films that are critic-proof, and frankly, where criticism is useless. And believe when that's true when you go in to see films like that. So you just sort of do it for the record.
You do, but you're a very polite person. Do you ever walk out?
Well, not if I'm reviewing. No, but if I'm at a film festival and I'm not reviewing that film and it's a waste of time, I'll run off to the next one. But even from my film festival selection point of view, I know that, this film is not in the running, so I'm going to go check something else out. There's just life is too short, a film festival is too compressed to spend 3 hours at a Portuguese, drug-addled marathon, when you have some other films to see.
There are some film critics who I admire because of their ability to sleep sitting up straight, and no one, unless you look into their eyes, would know that they are not with us. Now, have you ever mastered that talent?
Oh, I wouldn't want to say, but people have asked me once or twice if I ever fell asleep in movies, and I say only when they deserve it.
Right. Good to talk to you again, Todd.
Great to see you, Peter.